Nice compare. All right. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. I hope you're all doing well. Welcome back to the third session of us covering the Pandnāma. Without further ado, we can begin. Sorry about that slight delay. All right, so in this class, we're going to be covering more of the text. We're going to be covering sections on humility, denouncing pride, and not befriending ignorance. So without further ado, we can begin on humility, dar sifat tawazu. All right, so I thought that before we began the sections in the following classes, that we'd pull out a Quran verse that has to do with every section, just to kind of contextualize, let's say, what we're studying in the Quranic context. So in the Quran, it says, the true servants of the most compassionate are those who walk on the earth humbly. And when the foolish address them improperly, they only respond with peace. So here we see in the Quran, and of course in many other places, the importance of humility, and it's underlined here. All right, so now, as I said in previous classes, and since we have less people, I guess it's a bit more intimate setting, we can probably try to take turns reading. So does anyone want to volunteer to read the first couplet? I know that at least two of you can read Persian because you've read before. So if one of you wants to volunteer, it would inshallah, help us all benefit.
I can volunteer.
Please, thank you, Masim Ali.
دلا گر تواضع کنی اختیار شود خلق دنیا تو را دوست دار.
All right, beautiful. So Dila is just like Karima that we saw earlier. He's addressing his own heart. He's saying, oh heart, and then ikhtiyar is choose, khalq is creation, and dusdar is literally friend having, from dus, which is friend, and dar, having. So Saadi begins by addressing his own heart, and we said earlier in the last class that this is part of the Islamic humility, that he's not coming and saying, oh, other people, they need my advice. It's truly, in essence, advice to himself first. And then now, because of his amazing wisdom, we're benefiting from it. So Saadi is addressing his own heart first, before he addresses us. And he says, oh heart, if you choose tawazu, which is kind of like a Persianization of the Arabic word for humility, shavad khalq dunya tora dustar. So if you choose humility, the people of the world, the khalq, they will like you more. They will, they will enjoy your presence more, let's say. Then he continues. Let's see. Muhammad John. Oh, Muhammad has left our presence. Asna Khanum sister, do you have practice reading Persian? Would you like to try? Or if you don't like to, I can not call on you. But if you'd like to practice, you can. This is part of how I run my classes. But if you don't, it's fine. All right. So.
Well, Assalamualaikum.
Alaikum salam. Alaikum salam.
No, I haven't read Persian as such, but I can try.
Please, yeah, I would love to improve together.
So please correct me if I'm wrong.
Of course, of course.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Tawazu ziyadat, I don't know, sirat or dat, kunat jahra ka az meher par tau bud mahra.
Great. Just one thing. Bovad. So
yes.
This is Bud is and Bovad are commonly mixed up even by native speakers. Bovad is like is. It's like bashad, basically. So he says, Tawazuh ziyadat konat jahra ke az mehr parto bovad mahra. Great. Oh, you read it correctly mostly. So ziyadat, we can see the word ziyad is there is increasing. And jah is like a station or like a maqam. Mehr is sun, and parto is reflection. So he's basically saying in so many words that humility increases your station. Tawazu ziyadat konat jahro. So a humble person has like a higher rank. They're elevated in society. People appreciate their presence more. And then he uses this analogy, ke az mehr parto bovad mahro, like the sun illuminates the moon, right? So the moon's light is like a reflection from the sun in reality. So he's saying the same way that if you have humility, it's like you'll be reflected more or you'll shine more. Then he continues. Okay, I'll read this one. We can go in turns. Tawazu konad har ke hast adami nazibad ze mardum bejuz mardumi. And then tawazu, of course, we've covered. Adami is means human, and of course it comes from Adam. In the Islamic belief, Adam was the first human. And nazibad is from zibidan, Zibdan, which is from being worthy, right? So nazibad is, oh, apologies for that, means it's not worthy. And then mardum is, of course, people. So he says, tavazo konad har kas adami. So whoever is a true human will do tavazo, will have humility. Nazibad zamardum bijos mardumi. And it doesn't befit people other than peopleness, if that makes sense. So this is, of course, a contrast we see in Persian poetry between kind of this animal spirit or animals and humans. So humans, mardum, have to show mardumi. They have to act like people. And what is it that separates us from the animal kingdom? Of course, we share all the basic functions that animals have. I won't list them out because we're in good company. But what makes us different from them, right? It's our manners, it's our humility, it's our humbleness, it's our kindness, our cooperation, etc. These kind of higher traits that elevate us. Otherwise, we'll be living as humans, but as if we were animals. And you can see that a lot in these texts. So he's saying whoever is a true human, whoever is an Adam. And this is a way that we speak in Persian, although it doesn't make much sense in English because someone would say, of course, everyone's a human. But in Persian, when you say someone's an Adam, it means they're befitting the best characteristics of humans, if that makes sense. So an Iranian or a Persian speaker, generally, if they're upset with someone or they think someone has bad characters, they'll say, Adam nis, like he's not an Adam. Of course, he is in the most basic sense, but what's implied here is this kind of higher kind of level of being an Adam, to really embodying the spirit of humanity. And inside these poetry, we always see this humanist kind of, I don't know if humanist is the right word because it's kind of like a modern concept, but we always see this kind of focus on humanity that Saadi has. So he's saying it's only befitting for a human to be humble. And if you're not humble, if you act arrogant, then that's like an animalistic trait. And it goes back to that nafs hayvani that we talked about in the last class, that lower kind of state. All right, now Masum Ali, if you could take your turn, please.
تواضع بود حرمت افزای تو کند در بهشت برین جای تو.
Beautiful, perfect. By the way, Masum Ali and I had a class earlier. That's why I feel more comfortable, addressing him directly. He was in an earlier Persian poetics course, so it's a joy to have you back here. All right, Hormat means honor. Afzai is increasing, right? So we have the words afsayish, for example, are related to this. Behisht is heaven, the Persian equivalent of Jannah, and Barin is like the highest, the exalted. Behishta Barin, like in Arabic they would say Jannatul Firdaus, the highest rank of heaven. So he says, Tavazo bovad hurmat afzayato. So humility will increase your horma, it'll increase your honor. This is the irony where people who are arrogant, they think that their arrogance is what is preserving their honor. That by being arrogant, they are, they're showing that they're higher. But in reality, being arrogant has the adverse effect. It has the opposite effect of lowering your status in the eyes of people who, as we would say, have chishma basirat. They have the eyes of like seeing eyes or discerning eyes. So he's saying in reality, acting humble is what will increase your rank in front of people. And then he continues and he talks about the afterlife. He says, Konad dar behisht barin jayato. And it will make your place in the highest heaven, right? It'll exalt your rank in the world and in the afterlife. All right. And now we're joined by dear Anahita. I was wondering, thanks for joining. If you'd like, you can take turns reading the Persian with us. If you want to take a shot at it, Masum Ali and Asna Khanum are also doing that. So if you'd like, whenever you want, you can jump in and practice reading a bait. But of course, if you don't like to, that's fine as well. So Asna Khanum, do you mind reading this one?
Yeah, I'll try it again.
Sure, great.
Tawaza buad mai have dosti ka ali biwad pai dosti.
Right. This little letter here, I should say, it's very particular in Persian. This thing, we call it hamzeh, but it has the ye sound. So in the Persian language, let's say, for example, if I wanted to do an izafeh, and this is, I'm pretty sure in other Islamic languages, this also exists, like Urdu. For example, the word kitab, and sorry about this handwriting, I'm on a mouse. Kitab means book, right? But if I want to say that the book belongs to me, I can say kitabe man, right? So my book. But, so this is a normal izafeh. But what happens if the letter doesn't play nice with the eh, right? So what if I want to say khane man, my house, right? And it kind of sounds weird to say khane man, right? It kind of has like this weird sound. So in Persian, what we do is we put this hamza up here, which is the same letter that we have here, and that makes the ye sound. So when you want to do an izafe with a he ending, it's not khane man or ma ye dusti, it becomes khane man, ma ye dusti. So this little hamza here, when you're reading Persian, it has the ye sound, like ye. So tawazo bovad maye dusti, ke ali bovad paye dusti. And sorry, this little thing is a mistake. It should be a little vowel. Ali bovad paye dusti. Great. All right. Maye is like a material or a cause. It can also mean like a substance as well. Dusti is friendship, of course. We have the word dost in many Muslim languages. And paye is a basis. So, for example, earlier in the last class, he says, "Tekiye makon bar umr napayidar, dusti ro nashayad inqaddar." So he's saying, don't, in the last class from the Golistan, he says, don't lean on the world that is napayidar, right? That's and I'll show you how that's related. And we said napayidar is not having a foot, right? So pay is foot, but then we see that pay here as well. Paye means like basis or kind of like establishment or column in a way, right? So that's related to foot. The foot is like the column of the body. So he says tawazu or humility is the basis for friendship, right? For the basis of friendship is exalted. And this kind of goes into this I want to say Muslim. I don't know if it's too broad. Sometimes people take issue with that word, but I don't want to also just say Persian because of course it's greater than Persian. But it's this like Iranic, Indian, Pakistani, Persian, kind of Turkish. We kind of all have this thing where friendship is a very sacred thing. So if you look at it in a lot of cultures, there's friendships of convenience. So here I happen to be visiting family in America right now, and it's normal for Americans to say, "Oh, so-and-so is my fishing buddy," or "He's my, excuse my language, beer buddy," or I don't know, you might hear like Westerners speak like this. There's this idea that you can have friends who have very limited contexts, right? And you just interact on that context. So if you have a fishing buddy that you meet up with to fish with on Saturdays, let's hear a random American person, then it would be weird if like you called that guy on Wednesday and said, "Hey, let's hang out." Or if you called him in a time of need and said, "Hey, help me." And you would think, we're not the closest friends. Why do you want me to lend you money or something? They have like, sometimes friendships have limited capacities in like a lot of cultures. But in the Muslim culture, of course, friendship is so important. It's so deep. People would die for their friends and they are there. And when they need help, they come to their assistance and all kinds of things. So this is very important for Saadi in his poetry. He's always talking about dust and dusti and complaining about, unloyal friends. And it reminds me, there is this beautiful section of the Golistan where Saadi says, "I was good friends with someone like peas in a pod. And then one day the friend was gone. He left. Maybe some emergency happened. He didn't have, it's not like now where you can text, 'Hey, I'm leaving. See you later.' He had to leave for some reason to where he was from, and I didn't see him. And then many months later, he comes back and I see him and I'm so happy to, finally see him again. And he says, 'Hey, you disloyal friend.' He says, inside, he says, 'Why am I disloyal?' He says, 'All these months I was gone and you didn't send a courier or someone to bring a letter to me.' And then Saadi says, 'Yes, because it would hurt me for the courier to be lit up by seeing your beauty and for me to be deprived of seeing you.' He didn't want to send someone to see him and he couldn't see him in his place. So it just shows kind of like, and especially in Saadi, but of course, the culture, how important friendship is. And Saadi says, for this very important thing, the basis of it is humility, is, being humble with your friends. All right. And then, all right, if anyone wants to volunteer, they can go ahead and read it. If not, I'll read this one because I think you guys already read the last couple. تواضع کلید در جنت است. سرافرازی جاه را زینت است. So kilid is key, like miftah in Arabic, and jannat is like we read bihisht earlier, heaven. Sarafrazi is like head highness, like holding your head high or high rank, or let's say having respect. And jah, we covered it earlier, it's like maqam, station, rank, status. And zina or zinat in Persian is decoration. All right. So he's saying that humility is the key of the door of paradise. And it's kind of like it beautifies position and rank, if that makes sense. It's kind of hard to translate these things into English at times. But this is like in so many words, this is what he's saying. Like it'll beautify your position, your rank, and it'll elevate you. All right, Masum Ali, do you want to try your hand at this?
کسی را که عادت تواضع بود ز جاه و جلالش تمتع بود. Beautiful.
So adat is habit, and this is an interesting kind of Persian creation. It creates, it comes from ad, which means ad yaud in Arabic, which means to return to, and ada is the thing that you constantly return to. Jalal is honor, like we have, for example, we say Allah Azza wa Jal, it's that same root. And tamattu is enjoying or enjoyment. So it's interesting that in Persian, it's not like in Arabic where we say, they say like Hajj and they say Umrah, like if you just do a basic Hajj, they call it Umrah. In Persian, the non-required Hajj that you just do for, for spiritual purposes, but not the requirement, it's called Hajj tamattu, like enjoyment Hajj. I find it a very interesting use of that word. Otherwise, it's not used often in Persian. So he's saying the person who has the habit of tawazu, like they make a I don't know, a habit of being humble with everyone. The jaho jalalash tamattuh bovad, like he will enjoy jah, rank, and glory. He will enjoy those things the same way that we use enjoy in English. So you'll enjoy a good status, kind of let's say reiterating what he's said earlier. All right, Asna Khanum, do you want to try reading this?
Yeah. Tawaza kunad mard ra sarfaraz, tawaza buwad sarvaran ra taraz.
Great. Great. So sarafraz is, again, I said earlier, head being held high, and sarvar is a leader or a high rank. And you can see the word sar, it's coming from this head, right? So sarvar is someone with a head above. And taraz is a word that we don't use anymore. It's a robe or like a fancy kind of dress that shows like some sort of rank. So he says, Tavazo konad madro sarfaraz. So humility will raise your head up, will give you rank, will kind of make you, better amongst people, will show you nicely. And tavazo bovad sarvaron ro taraz. And for the sarvaron, the leaders, being humble or having humility is kind of like a garment, a fancy garment for them, a fancy cloak, a sign of rank. Then he says, Kasi ra ki gardan keshi dar sarast, tavazo azu yaftan khoshtar ast. So there's a beautiful word, gardan keshi. Gardan keshi, it's kind of like, I think it's a word from horses actually, where if a horse doesn't want to cooperate, it like moves its head backwards and forwards and things like that. I don't know if you guys have seen horses up close and when they act like this, but it basically means acting proud or like holding your head up or kind of wanting to act greater than you are. And yaftan is to find, and khoshtar is better, and you can see it's combined of the words khosh and tar, which means more, so more good. So it's saying the person who, and it's kind of like you could kind of translate this in different ways, but a person who kind of wants to rebel or to command or to lead or to kind of act unruly, that person who has that in their head, they say literally dar saras, who intends to do that, it's better to find him as a humble person. So someone who inclines to act this way, it's much nicer if you find that they're like, limiting this instinct and they're acting humble. All right, Masum Ali John, would you like to take a turn reading this?
تواضع کند هوشمند گزین نهد شاخ پر میوه سر بر زمین.
This air, by the way, so this is a font error. I should apologize. It's tavazo konad hushman gozin, but there's a font error for. I'm using a Mac. This is not my computer, and it looks fine on the PC, and the font looks nicer. But the font looks uglier here, and it also some of these harakat move. So my apologies. It's tavazo konad hushman gozin nahad shakh por mive sar bar zamin. A beautiful analogy. So nahad is from nahadan, which means to place. And shakh is a branch, por is full, and mive is fruit. So he's saying in so many words that a hushmand, a person, and maybe I should have added that to the vocabulary. This is something in the Persian language. You can add mand to mean that someone has something. So hush is sense or smarts, and mand is someone who has it. And we also have, for example, you can take the Arabic word sirva, and we make it sirvat in Persian, which means wealth. And then you can make it sirvat mand, wealthy, someone who has it, right? Where dard is pain. And then you can say dard mand, someone who has pain, you know? Geleh is complaint, geleh. And then you can have geleh mand, someone who has a complaint. So it just means to have. It's a very useful suffix nonetheless. So it's saying the person who has intelligence or smarts or wisdom, they will choose humility. And then he uses this beautiful analogy, nahad shakh por mive sar bar zamin. The fruit, the tree that's full of fruits will put its branch down. So, you know, branch, if you ever see it right before harvest, it's full of fruits, it's way down. And then when you take the fruits, it lifts up. So if someone has a lot of fruits of knowledge in their head, then that will weigh their head down and they'll kind of hold it down. And it's interesting, this kind of head holding down that I'm physically showing you guys, that in of itself is a very important symbolism in the culture. This act of holding your head down, of showing humility. Like when you greet people in Iran and Persianate cultures, it's common to put your hand on your chest and bow your head down like that. This is like how they say hello, like it's a sign of respect. And in many madrasas, Sufi centers, we call them, I don't even know how to translate this, we call them Zulkhane, which means literally like exertion home, but it's like a traditional kind of Islamic Sufi, let's say, exercise facility. Kind of like yoga is like both religious and an exercise. We also have this in Iran, in the Zulkhane. You can look it up, inshallah. Here, I'll write down how to spell it if you want someone wants to look it up later. Zulkhane. A lot of the times the Zulkhane, and this is, I think, in English, you could spell it this way, Zulkhane. The doors in the Sufi centers, etc., they'll be very short. They'll be like 4 feet tall, like 1.5 meters tall. And the reason a lot of people incorrectly think is that people back then were malnourished and they were shorter so that they could pass through. But the truth of the matter is that they were purposely built very short to force you to bow your head down as you enter. So to force you to show humility to the space that you're about to go in. All right, Asna Khanum, if you'd like to please read.
Tawaza madar az khalaik dar darig gardan az an bar kashidi jutig.
Great.
Or tag, I don't know.
Tiq, yeah, no, it's perfect, yeah. تواضع مدار از خلایق دریغ که گردن از آن برکشیدی چو تیغ. So خلایق is the plural of خلق. It means creation, and dariq means depriving or not giving something. And then, excuse me. Oh, great, okay. And then tiq is blade. So it's very rare to see words ending in ya and ghain. So these words are kind of like designed to rhyme with each other. So tawazu madar as khalayiq tariq is something like don't deprive the people of humility, you know. And then he says ke gardan az on bar keshidi chotir, and it's like, this was actually, I kind of debated how to translate this, and I had seen other translations and they differed with each other, but it's something like that you've drawn your head out from them like a sword. So something like when you draw a sword out of its blade, it's like kind of upright and bent backwards and it's like dangerous. He's kind of like speaking to someone who has had tawazut dariq, who has deprived people, and it's like, for you've drawn your head up like a sword, you know, the way you draw a sword out, you've drawn your head out and it's like a menacing sword that's been pulled out and upright. You know, he's saying don't have your head up like that, you know, kind of be chill with the people in so many words. Okay, Anahita John, if you could please read this one. Well, I don't know if they can hear me or not. You're muted. I don't know if you know you're muted or not, but since you volunteered to read so kindly. Let me see. Oh, it didn't work. Oh, no worries. Let me manually unmute you. I think maybe I have to unmute you or something. It's no big deal. All right. Oh, by the way, Muhammad John, who was recently joined, if you'd like to practice reading, we allow the people who are present to read, and if there's any problems, no worries, like we'll correct it. All of us are learning at the same time. So okay, I'll read this one. تواضع ز گردن فرازان نکوست گدا گر تواضع کند خوی اوست. So gardan faraz is a neck raiser, like we had afraz earlier. So gardan faraz is the person who raises their gardan, their neck. And geda is beggar, and I should explain what the context of this word, lest Saadi be misunderstood. When Saadi says beggar, he doesn't mean someone who's like down on his luck, someone who needs help and needs money and things like that, who genuinely like needs sadaqah from Muslims. That's not what he's talking about. Geda here is like the spiritual essence of being geda, right? So in Persian we would say geda sifat, and we covered this in my last course actually a while ago, months ago. But having the sifa of something, it's like having the characteristic. So here he's talking about having like beggarish characteristics, not like literally being a beggar. So all right, so basically what he means in so many words is someone who acts in a beggarly way, who is stingy with their money. So not a literal beggar, right? So someone who has money and has resources and doesn't need sadaqah or anything, but they're just because they're kind of like a cheap, it's almost like a synonym for cheap, really, like because they're stingy, they're purposely stingy, like they're like Mr. Krabs from SpongeBob. He had a big restaurant, but he was still stingy. And then khui is temperament. So he says, it's good to see humility from the people who raise their head. So the sultans, the generals, whatever, people of power, people who could act in an arrogant way, but choose to be humble. It's very nice to see that. And then he says, but if a person who is beggarly natured, who's stingy, if he acts humble, it's in his nature. It's not a big deal for him to show humility. So this kind of goes to this principle in Islam where not all sins and all good deeds are shown equally. So, or let's say weighed equally. So if you live next door to a mosque and your family's religious and your dad's the imam of the mosque, you don't get as many good deeds if you pray every prayer in the mosque than someone who walks 15 minutes to the mosque and their family doesn't like that they're religious. Or if you're rich and you give, I don't know, feed 10 poor people, it's not looked upon the same way than if a middle-class person feeds 5 poor people. So he's saying if someone who is beggarly in nature acts humble or acts lowly, and it's not the same as if someone whose nature is to act arrogant, like humbles themselves and lowers themselves and fights against their nature. All right, so this is kind of my short translation, but since I translate it for you guys just in the interest of time, I won't reread it. All right, now denouncing pride. And Anahita, John, I think you left and entered, so maybe you can unmute yourself if you'd like to read. So again, we'll start with the Quran verse where it says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, when it is said to them, fear Allah, pride carries them off to sin. Hell will be their proper place. What an evil place to rest. So pride is a very dangerous thing, even not from a religious standpoint, but even from a secular standpoint. Being excessively proud will cause a lot of problems for one in life, right? There's so many times in life where we're better off humbling ourselves. And, like if you fight with a loved one, even if you feel you're right, it's better to just humble yourself and kind of make amends. And so many other, examples where pride is really undoes people. All right. Anita, if you'd like to read, I don't know if you could try to unmute yourself. Oh, perfect. There you go.
Hi, are you able to hear me?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, wonderful. I'm going to give this one a try. تکبر مکن زینهار ای پسر که روزی ز دستش درآیی به سر.
Amazing, great. So zinhar is like beware, and in a negative sense, of course, that like you shouldn't do this thing. And I think I should have probably maybe added some more vocab words. Takabbur actually maybe would help to explain it. It's like taf'al from kibr. So kibr itself is the word in Arabic for pride, and takabbur is like acting proudy. I don't know if that's the correct English word. And then here Saadi is in the earlier section he was addressing himself, but now he's shifted to addressing like kind of like the young student. He says, "Hey pesar, oh boy." A kind of "oh boy" maybe would sound weird in English, but that's like how you address like a younger person who's learning. So he says, oh son, never show pride. Or maybe he's addressing his literal son, who knows that? It's kind of debated how many kids these people had, who knows. And then he says, for one day, zedastish daroi besar. And this is kind of like a very Persian way of saying like you'll fall from it in so many words. So one day, ke ruzi, zedastesh, from its hand. And this is again in Persian, when you want to say like something has caused something, you say from its hand, even if it doesn't have a literal hand, like takabur doesn't have a das, but it's saying from the dast of takabur, from its doing, daroi besar, you'll fall over, right? You'll fall onto your head. All right, Masum Ali Jan, would you like to do the honor of reading this one for us?
تکبر زدانا بود ناپسند قریب آید این معنی از هوشمند.
Dana is from Danistan. It means someone who has knowledge, who's knowledgeable. And nāpasand is another combination word. It's from nāpasand, meaning literally not acceptable. Qarib is strange. And hushmand, we covered earlier. Ego, yeah, exactly. Ego, takabur. Perfect. So he's saying from a person who is knowledgeable, takabur, pride, is not acceptable, right? So if a fool acts prideful, of course, but the person Saadi is addressing in a madrasa environment, who's studying Arabic grammar and literature and mantiq and logic and all these things, it would be unbefitting of him to be prideful. And then he says, qarib ayad in ma'ani as hushman. Ma'ani means meaning in its base, in the most basic sense, and this is how we use it now. But ma'ani can also refer to like a concept in pre-modern Persian. So he's saying qarib ayad, it's odd. It's like odd for a hushman, someone who's intelligent, to act this way, to have takabbur. All right. By the way, Muhammad, if you'd like to read, you can just chat and say so, and I can call on you. And same with Abu Fazal. You've recently joined. If you're interested in volunteering to read the text, you can definitely take turns. Oh, Anahita Jan, you've raised your hand. If you'd like to read it, go ahead.
Sure. تکبر بود عادت جاهلان تکبر نیاید ز صاحب دلان.
Great. Okay, so this sahib dil is such an interesting word that we're gonna have to talk about a bit, and it's such a Saadi word, by the way. I mean, other people have used the word, but Saadi uses this word in excess, like in the Bustan and the Gulistan. He's constantly referring to the sahib dil, so we'll kind of cover that. Adat, as we've said before, is habit, and jahil is an ignorant person from jahl, like you might have heard jahiliyat, for example. The Arabs refer to their time before Islam as the age of ignorance of Islam. They were ignorant of it. Sahib dil is such a Saadi word, and it's so hard to explain it, but literally in the most basic sense, it means owner or haver of a heart, a person who has a heart. And you could say, oh, everyone has a heart, right? Everyone who's living. And it's just the same way that when we say Adam, technically everyone is Adam, but it's like you mean a very particular thing. Owner of a heart here, it's like sometimes it's been translated as person of understanding, but it's basically like a dil, a person who understands their heart and has understanding and is like in touch with their humanity and kind of deeper things and deeper thoughts, and is like a let's say examined person. They've examined life. They're people of understanding. It's kind of like when you say a dil, the person who has a dil, it means a very particular thing, like they're in touch with their humanity and they feel for others. Or for example, you might see a similar related phrase, ahl dil, the people of the heart. These things can be very hard to explain. They're like so culturally centric. I mean, sometimes you feel like there's a lack, you come up with a lack of words. But it's something like, again, people who are kind of in touch with their emotions and their heart, and they feel sympathy and empathy, and they have emotional intelligence. And, unfortunately, and I feel like in modern culture, these traits have been considered feminine, right? Like it's only like men are not supposed to have these things, or men don't have these things, But in Persian, of course, Islamic culture, men are supposed to be in touch with their emotions, and we cry and things like that. So this is also part of it, to be a true man, which is unfortunately, even in Muslim culture, has kind of been lost. To be a true man, you need to be in touch with your emotions and your heart. And of course, you see their poets and things like that. So this is kind of, if I can summarize it, that what Sahib Dil is referring to, someone who is in touch with all of these kind of deeper states of the heart. So he says, takabbur bovad adat jahilan. So takabbur, pridefulness, ego, is the habit of ignorant people. And he says, takabbur nayayad za sahib dilan. And the people who are sahib dilan, who have, they're in touch with their heart and all those things I described, they would never show they would never show vain pride and etc. conceit. All right, Masum Ali Jan, do you want to take a shot at it?
اوکی. تکبر عزازیل را خار کرد، به زندان لعنت گرفتار کرد.
Beautiful. All right. Azazil is one of the words for Satan. It's a very obscure word. Khar is lowliness. Zindan is prison. And la'anat is damnation. So Saadi says in so many words. Oh, where did that jump to? Okay. That pride is oh wait, no, I jumped that. Sorry about that. That pride is what caused Azazil to fall, that made him lowly, that made Satan lonely. Because if you remember the story of Satan, he didn't want to bow to Adam because he said, he's just this little thing made out of dirt. And what is the deal with us having to bow to him? I don't want to do it. It was his excessive pride that caused him to fall, right? He was too proud to bow down to something that he thought of lower than himself, even if it was a command from God. So ultimately it was pride, and in Christianity, it's one of the 7 deadly sins for probably this reason, caused Satan to fall. And then he says, that made him, stuck or trapped in the prison of damnation. And this is one important thing, difference in Islam. It's that in Christianity, although I don't think this is original to Christianity, I think this was later on, there's this perception, like if you guys have seen Western cartoons or movies where if there's like hell is shown, the devil is standing there like ha 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 at the doors of hell, and everyone's going in and he's like torturing people there. Like basically hell is shown as an abode that the devil runs, like it's his show, the same way that God, the same way that God would run heaven. But in reality, in Christianity and in Islam, Satan is like trapped in hell as well, like he's being punished as well. So if you even read like Dante's Inferno, Satan is in like the lowest level of heaven where he's trapped. So this is one kind of mistake that we in modernity have, is we think that Satan is like running the show in hell, but in reality he's the most trapped and the most damned person there. Why? Because of the dangerous sin of pride. All right, Asma Khanum, do you want to try to read?
Yeah, sure.
Mhm.
Kasira ka kahe adat takabbur buad, starashpur gurur as tasavvur buad.
Great. So this is all right, okay. All that we've covered. Gurur is pride in a negative sense, not in the good sense of, like taking pride in your family or your achievements, but in like a negative sense. And tasavvur is imagination. So, excuse me. Sorry, trying to keep up with what you guys are seeing on this phone. All right, great. So it's saying one who has a habit of pride, the person who has the adat of takabbur, sarash por gurur as tasavvur بود. So his head is full of pride and like from imagination, basically. So he imagines himself to be greater than he is. So of course, all of us deep inside, we do this. We all feel like, we're better than what we are. This is just part of the human condition. But the person who shows it is basically just putting that on display. Their head is full of imagination for how great they are. And oftentimes, unfortunately, not to judge anyone harshly, but we see in life, like you encounter people who are really prideful. They're usually the people who you feel like would have the least to be proud about. Versus when you see, like Saadi says, people who would have a lot to be proud about, usually find humility in them. All right, Muhammad John, you're raising your hand. So if you'd like, you can please try to read this next couplet.
I'm trying. Takabur buat moi bot beri. Takabur buat asli bot gu.
Great. So you I don't think you were here when we covered the meaning of this thing. This is the hamza and it makes a ye sound, like ye, ye. So it's takabbur بود مایه بدبری. But other than that, great. مایه, as we covered earlier, is like origin or essence. And badbari is literally like bad taking, but it means causing trouble or pain. And bad gohari is a bad essence. So gohar, which in Arabic is johar, means the essence of something, the very core. And bad gohari is a bad essence. So he says, takabbur bovad maye badbari. So pride is a cause for bad things to happen. And takabbur بود اصل bad gohari, and it's also the origin of like having a bad essence. So if someone has like a, it's very sad, but has a bad essence, pride is at the very core of that. All right, great. And now the last line, if Anaita Jan would like to read the last line, sure, go ahead.
چو دانی تکبر چرا می کنی اگر می کنی تو خطا می کنی.
Great, mashallah. So he's saying, let's go over the vocab. Oh wait, there isn't. I think we've covered all these words before. So he's saying, since you know takabbur, and it's embedded here is like, how bad it is, the reality of it. Why do you do that? Why do you act proud? Agar mikoni to khata mikoni. And if you do that, you're going astray. You're making a big mistake. And again, in the essence of time, since there's a lot of slides in this PowerPoint, I won't be reading the full translation like in earlier classes, but we've live translated it. So you can go back in the video later if you'd like to read that. All right, now the last section of today's class on not associating with ignorant people. That imtina is sohbat jahilan. Sohbat means speaking to in modern Persian, but back then it meant like companionship, right? So for example, in Islam, we have the sahaba or a sahabi, a single person. This is where that root comes from. Sahaba means to befriend. And the reason it means talking to in Persian is because it started to mean like friendly conversation or like, friendship in terms of like communicating. And then now it just means to speak to someone, regardless of if it's friendly or not. So it's kind of lost that meaning in modern Persian. So in the Quran on ignorance, it says, "Oh, you who believe, if a sinful person brings you a report, verify its correctness, lest you should harm people out of ignorance and then become remorseful on what you did." So again, kind of just underlining the Quranic origin of these kind of this kind of thought and this Islamic morality, and just showing that when we act out of ignorance, it can cause big problems. And ignorance, like just like in actually Western cultures, they say ignorance of the law is no excuse. Like if the police pull you over for driving illegally, you can't say, "Oh, I didn't know that was the law." It doesn't matter. And it's the same in Islam. Like this is why it's so important for us to learn, right from wrong, and of course be taught it from a young age, but also pursue learning it as adults, because in life, it doesn't matter if we know or knowingly or unknowingly do sin or cause harm to people. Ultimately, it is attributable to us. So lest we be culpable for something, we should be careful. So I'll start it off. He says, "Dila agar kharadmandi o hushyar makon sohbat jahilan ikhtiyar." So now Saadi is not referring to Opesa, referring to a younger person. He's back to talking to himself. Kharadmand is, we covered mand earlier, it has someone who has wisdom, right? So kharad is wisdom, and mand is the person who has something. And hushyar is like hushmand, and it's just being like alert or smart or wise. And yar literally means like a partner. So someone who has like their senses as a partner to them. Sohbat, I just covered that as like companionship and speaking. And we covered jahil, and ikhtiyar is to choose. So Saadi is saying, "Oh heart, if you're wise and smart," nice rhyme in English, "do not choose the companionship of jahil people, of ignorant people." And this is, I wish that this was, instead of addressed to him, addressed to the youth, because this is one of the biggest mistakes that young people I've seen make, especially ages like 15 to 20, 25. And in Persian, we even have a phrase, we say, "Aman az rafiqa bad." May we be safe from bad friends. Because so many times you see people, when their life goes in like a bad path, they end up like addicted to drugs, God forbid, or committing crimes, or in bad relationships. A lot of time you see that they would otherwise not do these things were it not for the bad influence of friends. And this is one thing I think a lot of times our parents, especially those of us who've been raised in the West, misunderstand, is they think that the majority of the influence of a child comes from the home, that the parents' tarbiyah is what makes a kid what they are. But studies in Western countries actually show that the majority of the influence of a child comes from their friend group. This is why you see in Western countries more than in the East, for example. Of course, fads exist there as well, but it's kind of more intense in the West. This is why you see kids get so enveloped into fads, and they even like get into conflict with their family over it, because the primacy or the important thing is that they're accepted by the friend group, not that they're accepted by the home culture. So even if your parents find it weird if you dye your hair a different color or listen to heavy metal or whatever, because you want to be accepted by the friend group, you'll do that. So this is something that's so important, for preserving, of course, ourselves and our future kids, is being careful who were around. So many times, and not to go at length, but so many times I would find it annoying when I was a child, when my mother especially, God bless her heart, and may God preserve all the mothers out there for their efforts for us. She would scrutinize my friends a lot. And now I see the wisdom in it so much. I mean, before it just was like an annoyance, who cares? They're my friends. But now I understand, the wisdom behind that. So anyway, let's see. Abul Fadl, would you like to try reading? I don't know if you're interested or not. If you want, you can try it in this class. If not,
yeah, I can't read yet up to that level.
No worries. We'll work on it, inshallah. And I saw that you were in the Saadi class, so inshallah we'll work on it. All right. Masum Ali, would you like to give it a try?
Sure, yeah. ز جاهل گریزنده چون تیر باش نیامیخته شکر و شیر باش.
Great. Gorizande is the doer of gorikhtan, which means to flee. So he's saying, flee from the jahil. And then how do you flee? Like an arrow, like a tear. And then the next line, he says, amikhte, that's from amikhtan, which means to mix. And then shekar o shir is milk and sugar. So he's saying, flee from the ignorant person like an arrow, don't waste any time. Flee as quickly as possible. That's how dangerous they are. And B, don't mix like sugar and milk. And I never heard this phrase, and it's kind of, I guess he's going for what we would say like oil and water in English, how they don't mix. I don't know if this is the case. Has anyone tried to put sugar in milk? Maybe sugar doesn't dissolve well in milk, but I think it's so sweet that no one would try to put sugar in it. But anyway, like sugar and milk, if that's in reality that they don't mix together. All right. Asna Khanum, would you like to try to read this?
Yeah, sure. Tura is the hagar buwad yarigar as bi ke jahil buwad gam gusar.
Perfect. Yeah. So dragon is ijtiha, and yarigar is cave partner. So this is something that comes up in Rumi's poetry as well. And our first, the famous story when Hazrat Muhammad salam was with Hazrat Abu Bakr in the Ghar. They were hiding from the Quraysh, and this is a reference to that story. And it's also mentioned in a very famous Rumi ghazal. Maybe one day in a future Rumi class we'll cover it, where Rumi says, Yar maro, Ghar maro, ishq jigar khar maro. So, he's talking to Shams Tabrizi saying, you're my yar, you're my yar Ghar, like as if Abu Bakr and Hazrat Muhammad. Qam Gosar is from Qam and Gosardan, which literally means like sadness eating. And we also say this as well. We say Qussa Khordan, etc. in Persian. When we want to say that like someone is a confidant or that we are sad, we say we like eat our emotions. It kind of sounds weird in English. I guess in English you say eat your heart out. So maybe that's slightly related. But basically he's saying, if a dragon was your cave partner, so if you were like Hazrat Muhammad stuck in a cave hiding, and instead of someone like Hazrat Abu Bakr, you had Ijtiha hiding with you, it would be better to have that dragon than for a jahil, for an ignorant person, to be your like partner, to be your friend. Better to have a dragon than an ignorant person. All right. Anahita Khanum, would you like to try to read this?
Sure. I just need 1 second to
No
read
worries.
over it. اگر خصم جان تو عاقل بود به از دوست داری که جاهل بود.
Exactly. And once again, this reminds me of this this like Rumi phrase from the Masnavi. I'm just trying to pull it up. But khasm is enemy and aqil is intelligent. So he says, agar khasm jan to aqil بود به از دوست داری که جاهل بود. So he's saying, if your enemy is intelligent, it's better to have an intelligent enemy than a dumb friend. And then the reason behind this is explained perfectly by this Rumi poem. And I'm trying to pull it up, but it's having, all right, there we go here. Sorry, Iranian websites are so slow. I'm trying to pull this up. Okay, great. So then Rumi says, Dusti bo mardum dana nekust. دشمن دانا به از نادان دوست. So he's saying friendship with intelligent people is good. This is Rumi talking now, not Saadi. دشمن دانا به از نادان دوست. But an enemy who's wise is better than an ignorant friend. So the best thing are wise friends. But if you can't have a wise friend, it's better to have a wise enemy than an ignorant friend. Why? دشمن دانا بلندت می کند. بر زمینت می زند نادان دوست. Intelligent enemy will rise you, but an ignorant friend will slam you to the ground, right? So if you have a rivalry with an intelligent person, it will force you to become intelligent, to outdo them, or to hold your own. But if you have an ignorant friend, they'll knock you down with their ignorance. So this is related to Saadi saying, "Agar khasm jan to aqil bovad, be az dostari ke jahil bovad." And of course, it goes without saying, Saadi and Rumi were lived at the same time. So it's interesting they have these similar sentiments expressed so similarly. All right. And Muhammad Jan, would you like to try to read this?
Okay. چو جاهل کسی در جهان خور نیست که ندان تر از جاهلی کار نیست.
One second, I'm sorry. This is important. Anyway, چو جاهل کسی در جهان خار نیست. Perfect. که نادانتر از جاهلی کار نیست. Amazing. Kha is low or base, and nadan is like we covered dana. It's just ignorant, like the negation, someone who is ignorant. So he's saying no one is lowly in the world like the jahil, like the ignorant person. And there's no one, more ignorant than a jahil, and there's nothing more ignorant than doing jahili. There's no deed or work, kar. All right. Now, Masum Ali Jan, could you do us the honor?
Sure. ز جاهل حذر کردن اولی بود. از او ننگ دنیا و عقبی بود.
Oh, one thing. This is ola and uqba.
Ola. Oh.
Yeah, this is a feature of the Arabic language that doesn't exist in any other language that I'm aware of. But in Persian, we've imported some of their words. So this is called alif maqsura, which means like shortened or cut alif in Arabic. And it's a letter that's like, it could be a Y or an alif, depending on where it is in the word or like how the word changes. So he says, Jahil has kardan ola bovad, kazu nang dunya uqba bovad. Hazr is avoiding, nang is shame, and uqba is afterlife. And maybe I think it should have added ola, but you can see awal in there, aval. It's kind of self-explanatory. Ola though means like primary. Primary is not the word. It's like more pertinent, or it's more of a. It's like more avaltar, if that makes sense. The most aval, if that makes sense. So he's saying the jahil has kardan ola bovad. So kind of refraining from ignorant people, that is the highest priority. Kazu nang dunya uqba bovad. For from him there is the shame of the world and the afterlife. So in the world you'll be shamed by being with ignorant people, and they will cause you to do things that will also shame you in the afterlife. So it'll ruin your deen and your dunya. All right. Now, Anayta Khanum, if you could try to read this as well.
Sure. Just 1 second.
No worries.
ز جاهل نیاید جز افعال بد، از او نشنود کس جز اقوال بد.
Amazing. Af'al is the jam of fa'al, meaning actions. And aqwal is similarly, or aqwal in Arabic, the jam of qawl, which is sayings. So he's saying that ja'il nayayad juz af'al bad. So from the ignorant does not arrive, nothing comes from him, or meaning he doesn't do anything but bad deeds. He'll only bring bad. And azu nashnavad kas juz aqwal bad. And from him, no one will hear anything but bad sayings, bad deeds. All right. And now, I think this is almost the last 2 lines in this section. Asna Khanum, would you like to try?
Yeah. Sir anjam mein jahil jahannam buad, ki jahil niku akibat kam buad.
Beautiful. سرانجام جاهل جهنم بود که جاهل نکو عاقبت کم بود. So saranjam is sar, which is head, and anjam, ending. So the ending, the niku is good. It's originally niku, but it's contracted here. Aqbat is destiny, and kam is few. So let's see, sorry about that. So he's saying the ending of a jahil is hell. And jahils who have a good ending, there are very few and far between. So he's really adding in as much emphasis as he can to kind of warn us against hanging out with these people. And then, all right, now I think this might be the last line. And let's see, Masum Ali, would you like to try it?
Sure. سر جاهلان بر سر دار به که جاهل به خاری گرفتار به.
All right, so this last line is kind of maybe harsh by our modern standards, but maybe this is how people talked in the medieval times. But he says, dar, I think the only word that we haven't covered is dar, which is gallows or where people are hung. So he's saying, Sar jahilan bar sar dar be. So the head of the ignorant people is better at the head of the gallows, you know, better they be hung. So it's better that the jahil be kind of, let's say, giraftar kind of means like stuck or preoccupied with the trouble. So better that the jahils be troubled. So of course he's speaking, he's kind of like speaking in hyperbole here. He's saying, you know, better that they be troubled with being hunger, like something preoccupy them so that they don't bother other people. Like if only some calamity could keep them busy so that they wouldn't bother us. All right, so that is that. And this is of course recorded. So if you'd like, you can check the translations if anywhere was confusing. So yeah, that is the end of the slides. Are there any questions or comments or notes or anything? Any questions about any of the translations, any vocab, anything, you know, it's just a free time.
Yeah, I want to ask you something, brother.
Sure.
I'm told that my name is Asna Seher, which is like a Persian word, Asna and Seher. So how can I just like get the full meaning of my name? If somebody asks me that, what is the meaning?
Sure. So Sahar, it's a common name even till this day in Iran. It means like dawn. You know, I'm pretty sure it means dawn in English. Sometimes these like particular translations. Asna, yeah. And then Asna means like Ali tar. If I don't know if you have Ali, maybe Ali is in your language. Ali tar is like higher, or bolan tar, it's like high rank, or Rafi, for example, also means high, like exalted kind of in English is like exalted. Sorry about this bad writing. Exalted, if that makes sense. Or like ranked, like high rank. Does that make sense? I don't know like what good English translation there is of it, but like someone who's higher, who's, you know, has like a high important rank. Kind of like the name Ali, actually. The name Ali means the same thing. My second name.
Yeah. So like I want to know that, is it like Sin, Sahar or Saud? Like,
oh, it's Sahar like this. This is Sahar. Yeah.
Okay.
And this is the first part.
Yeah.
You can ignore the aliyah. That's it, exactly. All right.
Okay, thank you so much.
No worries, my pleasure. Any other questions? You know, if not, I won't keep you guys on a Saturday morning. I'm sure there's many, or maybe actually afternoon and night for many of you, but even more reason to let you guys go. So if there's no other questions, of course, if it comes to mind, you could just say it next class. We have still 2 more classes that run at the same time. So I'll see you guys as soon as tomorrow. With that, I'll let you guys go. All right, Khuda Hafiz, everyone.